What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be diving deep into Glassfy, a SDK and product that provides in-app purchase infrastructure to meet your needs. So before we jump into an implementation example, let's actually go through what the Glassfy product and SDK offers. So more or less, what it boils down to is in-app purchases, particularly subscriptions, are a major pain to set up. There's a lot of issues with receipt validation, handling server-to-server notifications, integrating different events like cancellation, conversions, auto-renewal, turning off, etc., etc. So Glassfy provides an SDK as well as a dashboard to build, grow, analyze, and scale your subscription businesses. Their pricing actually starts off as totally free for up to $10,000 in monthly revenue, and then it goes up from there. And we're going to dive deep into it today. They're already available for iOS with cross-platform availability slated to come soon. So that all said, start by dropping a like down below, get pumped, open up Xcode, and let's build out some in-app purchases with Glassfy. Let's begin by opening up Xcode and creating a new project. We're going to stick with the app template under iOS, and let's go ahead and call this project super creatively test. We're going to stick with Swift as our language of choice, and we'll be working in UIKit, aka Storyboard. Go ahead and save the project wherever you'd like. And the first thing we actually need to do before we give this a run in a simulator is bring in the Glassfy SDK. Now we're going to bring it in via CocoaPods, and what we need to do is actually close up Xcode there. We're going to go ahead and open up Terminal, and we're going to cd into our project directory, which we call test. We're going to go ahead and initialize CocoaPods by saying pod init, and from there we can open up the pod file. Once the pod file is open, we're going to bring in the Glassfy SDK like so, version 1.1.0. Go ahead and close text edit, and we can run pod install, and this will install the SDK. Once you see success messages in your terminal, we can open up this folder and open the workspace that we have now created here as a byproduct of installing the SDK. I've also got a simulator opened up here. It is the iPhone 13 Pro. Let's select the simulator in this drop down here and go ahead and just hit Command R to build and run. We should see our empty application loaded and launched like so. Now we're going to get to the interesting piece where we will begin to set up a manager to handle all of our in-app purchases through the Glassfy SDK. We'll also initialize the SDK and start setting up a bit of our UI. So we're going to be doing the interaction for in-app purchases in a class called IAP Manager, otherwise known as In-App Purchase Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and create this like so. And inside of here, we are going to create a singleton, which will interact with the Glassfy's SDK. So let's start by actually importing that SDK. We'll create a final class, which will be an IAP manager. And we're going to have a singleton for this guy, which will be shared. And we essentially want a number of functions on here that we're going to use to interact with our in-app purchases. So first and foremost, we want to be able to configure the SDK. So we'll have a configure function. We're going to want to go ahead and be able to get our products. So we'll have a function for that. Now getting our products, in our case, we'll have one product. We'll make it singular. We actually want to have a completion block in here. And we're going to pass back a glassfy.skew to the caller. And the reason we're going to pass this back is because the skew, in turn, we can access things like the product title, description, price, and other relevant information we're going to need to show on our UI. Now, related to getting products, once we've gotten one, presumably we want to allow the user to purchase it. So let's create a purchase function here. And this purchase function will take in a SKU. So we'll say glassfy.skew, just like that. Other than purchasing, another really critical aspect of any subscription-based app is we want to check the user's permissions. So as I briefly touched on in the very beginning, the concept here is once a user has purchased a particular product, we enable or we check some permissions for the user to check if they are enabled. So when the app launches, every single time we should be checking if certain permissions are valid for a user. So I'm going to go ahead and create a function called getPermissions. And for new users who have previously subscribed to our subscription, we need to allow a way to restore purchases. So we're going to create a function super creatively called restore purchases like so. So this will be our base functionality, and we're going to want to set all this up through Glassfy. So let's get started with configure. So all we need to do here is say Glassfy, and we're going to go ahead and initialize the SDK with an API key. One thing I want to call out here is one really great thing about this SDK is if you want to take advantage of all the dashboards and infrastructure that is provided but aren't quite ready to migrate things yet, you can enable the watcher mode, as they've called it here, provide the API key, and you can still get all of the analytics, which is pretty great that you're not, just tied to using them as a one-stop solution. You can do it in pieces and migrate slowly. But today we're not going to be using watcher mode. We can actually get rid of this. We need to put our API key in here. Now, where do we actually get said API key? Well, we're going to go back to Glassfy's website. I'm going to hit login, and I'm actually already logged in here. So it's going to ask me to create my first app. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a test app. We're going to have an organization here. So this is actually, let's see, this is creating my Glassfy account. So that's actually not what I want to do. What I want to do is actually sign in. So let's try that one more time. Let's go back to glassfy.io. I believe I hit the wrong button. I want to hit login is what I want to do. And let's see, here is asking me to create my account, I guess. So maybe I actually forgot to do this. So let me actually do this. We'll put in my identifier and we'll toss this in here. I don't think we want a space. Let's agree to the terms and continue, and this should create our app for us just like that. Okay, cool. So now that we've got this, the first thing you'll notice is we actually see our API key right here. We can hit this handy button, simply copy it, and paste it on in our code. Now that we've got this actually set up, when our app launches, we want to call the configure function. So inside of app delegate, we're going to go ahead and say IAP manager shared, and we can say go ahead and configure yourself. Now that we've configured the SDK, we want to have all of the additional functionality here as well. So let's actually write all of this out. So the first thing we want to do is get a particular product. So we can actually simply say Glassfy, and we can say go ahead and get a SKU with a particular ID, and we'll have a completion which will return the SKU as well as a nullable error. One thing I want to point out is you can actually get offerings directly as well, which you can use to group various SKUs together. We're just going to be using a single SKU today. So we're going to go ahead and say give me a SKU for a particular product. We're going to have a callback here. Now, instead of using strings here, I like to keep things a little more type safe and structured. So we're going to have an enum for our products. We're simply going to have a single product today, and it's going to be called premium for our premium subscription. And maybe we'll call this SKU, and our SKU is simply going to return our raw value like that, which will be the premium name here as a string. Now when we go to fetch the SKU, we can simply say give me product.premium.raw value. We're going to expect to get a SKU back and a error like so. We're going to verify that we got a SKU back by unwrapping it. We're going to verify that the error is still nil as well, and we can go ahead and return if either of those cases aren't met. And finally, we can pass the SKU back to our callback via the completion handler like so. So it's actually that simple to get a product via the Glassfy SDK, which is really nice because it keeps things very brief, not a lot of overhead in terms of lines of code. I've got this line break here, but in reality, this is basically 2 actual lines of code, 3 if we count the curly braces. So moving along, in terms of purchasing, it's just as simple. So we're going to say Glassfy. We can go ahead and purchase a SKU. You can actually pass in discounts in here as well, which is pretty cool. It's pretty simple to do, but we're simply going to pass in the SKU that's passed in as a parameter. And finally, in the callback, we have a transaction and a error. So we're going to get the transaction like so. Let's try that one more time. Transaction. We'll have the error. We're going to verify that we have a valid transaction by saying t equals transaction and error equals nil, like so. If we don't have one, we'll simply return. Now on this transaction, we have a variety of properties. The thing that we care about is permissions. Now, specifically in our permissions, we care about the product.premium permission, and we want to verify that it's valid. So if this is valid, we want to tell the rest of our app, hey, that the permission is valid now, we should unlock the relevant piece of content. And this is going to be a theme that you'll notice in a lot of these other functions down here as well. So even in this get permissions function, we're going to say glassfy.permissions. Go ahead and get the latest permissions. And we generally want to call this as soon as our app launches to get the most up-to-date permissions that are still valid. And the reason for that is the user's subscriptions might not have renewed, something might have been canceled on a different device, etc., etc. So similarly, what we want to do is we want to unwrap permissions, similar to the transaction, which was slightly different, but similar theme. We're going to go ahead and verify that the error was in fact nil, an error didn't occur. And once we've done that, we're going to actually copy and paste that same if block and say in the permissions, check if the premium permission is valid. And just like that, we're going to fill this out momentarily with something in here to notify the rest of our app that the permission is still valid. Let's fill out the very last function here. And this last function is going to be Glassfy, and we're simply going to restore purchases. And you'll notice that the callback here is actually identical to this callback. So we can actually go ahead and simply copy and paste this block. What I really like about the SDK here is that it's very consistent and the APIs are very brief and not unnecessarily verbose like a lot of other SDKs that you might come across. So now that we've got all this good to go here, let's actually jump on over to the dashboard and let's talk a little bit about the dashboard. So you'll notice that we have an Apple shared secret entry here. We actually need to fill this out. And we also need to create our products and permissions, aka those SKUs that we're trying to fetch on over here in the dashboard. Now, before we actually create them here, it's probably a good idea that you create them in App Store Connect for your app that you are building. So I've taken the liberty of logging into App Store Connect here. We've created a test app and we're in the in-app purchase section for our app. We're going to click on app specific shared secret first and foremost. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and we're going to go back to the Glassfy dashboard, hit the settings tab, and we're going to paste it into the Apple shared secret field. This is important so the Glassfy backend can connect to Apple and perform tasks like receipt validation for you. The next thing we want to do is create that product. So back in App Store Connect, we're going to go ahead and close this box and we're going to hit the plus here. And we want to create a auto renewable subscription. We'll go ahead and tick that box. We'll continue here. We want to start filling this out. So we're going to say product ID is going to be premium. We're also going to say the reference name is going to be premium. We're going to go ahead and continue. And here we're going to say that we want to stick with premium. So it's going to say, do you want to create a new subscription name or stick with premium? We want to stick with premium, which I created beforehand. We'll go ahead and hit the create button. And if it yells at you for any reason, the product you entered has already been used, we can go ahead and simply tweak it. So let's actually call this, instead of premium, let's call it gold. And we'll actually change that in our code as well. So let's go ahead and continue, and that should be able to create it for us, and we shouldn't have an issue. One thing I've noticed in my experience, sometimes App Store Connect likes to be a little bit slow, but if you ever end up hitting this where it's taking too long, feel free to reload the page. It looks like it just finished there for me. If it doesn't for you, make sure you just reload the page. So notice that the product ID here is gold, but here in our code, we're using the permission for premium. These do not have to match. However, it is probably wise to have them match since it'll simplify your readability of your code. So let's go ahead and do a find and replace on premium. And we'll say find everything, and we're going to replace it with the word gold. So our product and our permission are going to be gold, just like that. So we have golds in all the places we originally wrote premium. Now that we've created it here, we're not quite done in the dashboard on the Apple side. We're going to switch this, our actual cadence of our subscription, to be monthly. We're also going to come down here to the section for localization, and we're going to hit the plus button and add a English US localization. Looks like I picked UK there. Let's try US. Let's go back up. We'll stick with the US localization, and we can actually get rid of the UK one. I'm going to go ahead and call this gold as a title, and the description will be unlock all gold features, just like that. Go up to the hand on the top right and click on save, and we'll go ahead and actually save this. The next thing that we want to do is add some pricing. So we're going to hit the plus button next to subscription and pricing, and we'll select a price in here. Perhaps we're going to charge $10 a month, $9.99. Go ahead and select it, hit next. It'll compute all the prices in the various territories that the App Store is available in. We'll assume that these are all fine and hit create, just like that. It'll go ahead and create it. We just need to hit the save button one last time, and we should be good to go in the Apple dashboard. So just bear with me here while this decides to save. And actually, while this is saving, the other thing we can do, and actually it looks like it's just finished up right there, we need to now go to the Glassfy dashboard, and under the products tab, we want to add a SKU as well as add a permission. So let's get started with the SKU. So this is pretty simple. We simply are going to type in gold in here, which will be matching our Apple product ID. And in our actual product ID down here for App Store product ID, it'll also be gold. This will help our readability tremendously that these match. Now that we've got both of these added, simply go ahead and hit this big save button down here. And that's honestly as simple as it gets. The next thing we want to add is a permission to tie that SKU to. So we'll go ahead and call this permission gold. We're going to go ahead and say gold features. We want to select a SKU with this permission, and we'll use gold just like that. Finally, hit save, and actually that's all we need to do to create a SKU and permission the dashboard, and we can now start using this stuff in our project. So what I really like about this SDK is it's pretty darn simple to get up and running. There's not a whole lot of configuration that needs to go on. So let's actually jump into our view controller and let's actually create some UI, maybe a button to actually trigger the purchase. And I want to go through local testing with in-app purchases as well in a moment. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is we're going to create an image view, and this image view is going to start off with a locked image, and the idea here is when you test it, the lock should change to an unlock once you have successfully subscribed to the subscription in-app purchase. So we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and return said image view. I'm going to go and say that the tint color is going to be a system blue. Next up, we're going to go ahead and make an image here. So this image is going to be an image, and we'll use a system name, and I believe a lock is the one that I'm looking for by default. Next up, we just want to say that this translates constraints for auto resizing masks. We'll just go ahead and say false here, and that way we can actually use auto layout to lay this guy out. So let's see why this is yelling at me. I forgot my equal here, it looks like. And let's go ahead and add this on our subview. So we'll say view, add subview, this guy, and we're gonna add some constraints. So we'll do activate, and we're gonna add a height anchor, and the height of this image, perhaps we'll do 220. We're gonna copy and paste this for the width, and let me get rid of this left panel so we have a little more real estate to work with. So this here will be with anchor, and we want this to be in the center. So I'm simply going to do the center X anchor will be a constraint equal to the view center X anchor. And last up, we're going to have the Y anchor like so. Go ahead and give it a run, and we should see a blue lock image in the center of the screen, just like that. To actually trigger the purchase, we probably need to fetch the SKU first. But to actually even do that, we need a button to trigger that fetch and the purchase flow. So let me go ahead and create a button. And what I'll go ahead and do is copy and paste this, and we'll just change this up as needed. So this is going to be a UI button. This will be a button as well. And we'll make this a button for readability's sake as well. And we're gonna use constraints once more, so we'll need this. And let's actually set a title and background. So we'll set a title of purchase, state will be normal, and we're gonna set a background color, perhaps to system green. And we're gonna set finally a title color. And we're gonna perhaps stick with white here, and we'll make this normal like so. Let's go ahead and add this onto our UI, and let's try to purchase something. So we need to do view, add sub view once more, and finally we can actually go ahead and just copy and paste all of these and just tweak them as needed. So first up, we're gonna change all of these to button. This will be button, button. The height will be 50, width will still be 220. Center X, we can leave that as is since we want this to be horizontally centered. The only thing that I'm going to change here now is we're going to say that the button's top anchor is going to be a constraint equal to the image view's bottom anchor with a spacing, a constant of perhaps 20. Go ahead and give that a run, and we should see a button that says purchase right below the lock. Looks like I've got a typo there. Let me just go ahead and give that a fix and a rerun, and we see this button. So when we tap on this button, of course, we want something to happen. So we're going to create a function, and it's going to be called purchase. So we're going to go ahead and tie the button to that function. So we'll say the selector here is purchase, and the event is touch up inside. Now when this function gets called, the first thing we want to do is we want to say IP manager that's shared, and we actually want to get the product first and foremost, and we're going to have a callback here. Now we're going to get the SKU back, so we do need to import the Glassfy SDK in this file as well. And to start off, we're just going to print out the SKU product, and I'm going to print out the localized title, description, and price. That way we can verify that we're actually getting the proper information back. So we'll get price. And before we give this a run, back in our app delegate, let's verify we're calling configure. Otherwise, we won't be able to actually leverage the SDK. Let's go ahead and expand this bottom console and give our app a run. All right, we see some stuff in the console. Gonna go ahead and hit this button, and we see we in fact did get the value back. It's $9.99 a month. The description is to unlock all gold features, and here is the title. The next thing we want to do after getting all this information back is potentially show it on screen, but in our case today, we want to actually trigger a transaction, a purchase. So we're going to say IP manager.shared, and we're going to say go ahead and purchase the SKU. Let's try that one more time. We're going to hit this button, and we're going to see that we get this login form. So this is the other thing that I wanted to briefly cover here. So since we're in a simulator environment, one really great thing you can do is create a configuration file to test this flow locally. So we're going to create a new file, and we actually don't want to stick with a Swift file. We want to find a StoreKit file. We can leave the default name here. And inside of this, we're going to create the exact same auto-renewable subscription locally so we can actually test. So we'll give it a group name of gold. Inside of here, the most important thing is for everything to match in terms of the product ID. We'll make this $9.99. And let's also go ahead and toss a localization inside of here. So for English US, this will be gold. And we're going to have the same description. So we'll say unlock all gold products, just like that. And before you give it a run once more, we're going to hit edit scheme, and we're going to supply that StoreKit file like so. Go ahead and give it a run. We'll cancel this guy here. And when I hit the button, what we expect to see is the actual transaction sheet at the bottom now, just like that. So look at that. We've got in-app purchases working with a very minimal amount of code in our IAP manager. So we'll go ahead and accept this purchase. It'll go through as expected, and just like that, we have successfully made our purchase. Now, one important thing to point out here is you're going to see an invalid error call in your console, and that's because we're testing on a simulator. What you really need to do to test your purchasing flows end to end is have a sandbox user account and test on a physical device. The actual job of updating your app to unlock content after a purchase, we're going to be leveraging Notification Center to do that. In other words, whenever we say purchase or restore purchases and a particular permission is valid, we are going to post a notification to any observer that we now have access to this permission. So we're going to post a notification with a name here. So we'll say notification.name, and this will be gold, and the object here will be nil. And for now, we can go ahead and copy and paste this into each of those if blocks that we previously left empty. So right there, and finally right there. Now back on our view controller where we have our lock image, what we want to go ahead and do is say that we have an observer for that notification. So we're going to create an observer here that is mutable. It'll be an NS object protocol, just like that. And up here, we're going to say observer is going to be notification center. We're going to add an observer for the name that I just copied and we wrote on the other file. We're going to be notified on the main queue, and we're going to leverage this block here to actually notify this controller that something needs to happen. Now, what actually needs to happen in our case? In our case, we want to just update the image views image. So we're going to say image is going to be UI image. System name, and this is going to be lock.open, just like that. So if you give it a run, you'll notice that we don't actually see the open lock, and that's because we need to be fetching the most up-to-date permissions. So we're going to say IP manager shared, and we're going to say get permissions. I believe that's what I called it, like so. Go ahead and give that a run. And we'll see here once again in our console that we get the invalid error for the receipt data property. And the reason we get that is because we're actually testing on a simulator. So not the fault of the SDK, definitely the fact that we're testing with this mock environment on a simulator. So that is Glassfy in a nutshell in terms of integration. Pretty simple in terms of what we need to actually do to interface with the SDK. Before we wrap up here, I do want to touch on a couple things here in the dashboard. First and foremost, in the dashboard, you can see a lot of analytics data like your revenue, your various cohorts, your churn, your actual cancellations, and various pieces of information that you expect to know when running any subscription business. The next thing that's important are your actual metrics here, which go hand in hand with that dashboard. What I want to focus a little bit on, which I think is extremely cool that I haven't actually seen elsewhere, is this paywall tab. This currently seems to not be available, and that demos are, kind of requestable from Glassfy. But the idea here is you can use this visual editor on the left that's blurred out to build a paywall screen. So if we actually go to, I believe, the documentation here, there's actually a paywall section which gives you really great pictures of what you can expect. So if we go to paywall creation, you'll basically see the tool here and the fact that you can drag and drop various components and build beautiful paywalls that you see pretty commonly in a lot of apps nowadays. Those paywalls are pretty important to not only convert users. You don't want to have an experience of, a subscription that doesn't have a button that works, or a subscription that doesn't look professional to scare off a user. So definitely pretty cool that this is baked directly into this dashboard. It also allows other disciplines than developers, people like product managers and business folks, to go and configure these paywalls and see them. The last thing I'll touch on here are triggers, which I believe are pretty cool in their own rights. You can set up triggers for various events that occur. If you want to notify any third-party API or any other integration you have for renewals, when subscriptions are canceled, expirations, when trials are started, free trials, and aren't converted, etc., etc. So it's pretty great that the platform not only gives you a bunch of connectors out of the box for all these third parties, but they also give you triggers with presumably these webhooks to make the solution that you really need for your business case. So that is Glassfy in a nutshell. I've left a link down below in the description so you can check them out as well. In terms of pricing that I briefly touched on towards the beginning of the video, it is completely free for up to $10,000 in monthly revenue on the integrating app side right here. So up to 10K in monthly revenue. And then from there, you get into the build and the grow plans. And what's pretty great is it's pretty transparent in this table down here, what's included and what you get for the various tiers. So it looks like the build plan is actually unlimited revenue, which is pretty crazy because if you have a multi-million-dollar revenue generating app, the overhead in terms of someone maintaining all of this infrastructure for only 0.5% of your revenue is pretty great. So that is all I've got for you guys today. Drop a like down below if you haven't done so already. Let me know in the comments if you use in-app purchases and how you currently have them set up. Do you use another SDK? What do you actually use to build out the server side of things? Do you have your own server? Would love to understand how you guys are working with these various tools. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.